This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.
Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. This episode is brought to you by CampingSurvival.com. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including bug-out bags, long-term storage food, water filters, gas masks, and first aid kits. Check them out online today at CampingSurvival.com. Be sure to enter coupon code PrepperRecon for a 5% discount on your entire order. Today's guest is David Quintieri. He's the author of The Money GPS. David, thanks for coming back on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be on here. I love the Prepper Recon podcast, so I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. And we've got a lot of new listeners since the last time you were on this show. Can you just give us a real quick overview of your book, The Money GPS?
Absolutely. So the Money GPS is basically a simple book for people to understand the financial system. Now, it's not which stock to invest into and that sort of thing. It does get into a bit of historical knowledge. People get to learn what is inflation, and then they learn how to take their money that they're earning in their 9-to-5 job or perhaps money on the side they're making and really protect your wealth. It's a wealth preservation system. I use a lot of illustrations for people to really make it easy because ultimately the education system is a failure and it hasn't taught the people what to do with their money and also how to protect it so that you can leave money for your children, for your grandchildren, and how to be debt free. So I get into all that really simple terms, and that's been sort of my biggest project I've worked on so far.
And then you also have a website. It's themoneygps.com, and you do pretty regular updates on there. And you did a recent video, and it was called Prepare Now for the U.S. Dollar Freefall. Can you tell us a little bit about that video?
Absolutely. So themoneygps.com is basically just where all of my YouTube stuff will end up, as well as, some other things. But that video specifically was about the fall of the U.S. dollar and ultimately how it affects the individual. So when the dollar collapses, which it absolutely must, and we can get into that in a moment, but when it collapses, some people are simply unaware of how this will affect them. When the dollar collapses, there's going to be mass chaos, but it will not collapse overnight. That's what people are waiting for, this trigger point. They're just, they're watching the market. The Dow Jones is, it's still at 16,000. The dollar will be okay today. It's okay. Gold is, at this price. That's not the way it works. It happens as a slow erosion over time. And we've seen this with China and Japan going on their own way, doing deals with each other. Then Russia got in on that. Brazil, all these other countries are doing deals with each other, not using the US dollar. And eventually that is going to collapse the system. As long as nothing else, a major collapse comes along in its way, that will be the slow erosion that will destroy the US dollar.
And the dollar's already lost about 98% of its value since the inception of the Fed in 1913. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. And most people don't realize it because as long as their dollar bill still says $1 on it, its actual purchasing power doesn't mean anything to them. They're not aware. They're just wondering why all of a sudden they need to work overtime every single week just to be able to afford the bills. Why every time they go to the grocery store, they think back a year ago and, I thought, carrots were, cheaper this year, but well, you know what? I'll just keep buying them and forget about it. I have more important things to deal with in my life. So we're so busy all the time, they can't even think about it, and they're not realizing that their actual wealth is diminishing day over day.
And while that portion of the evaporation of the wealth in the dollar has been spread out over 100 years, there's really no guarantee that it's going to keep that slow, steady pace of decline. I mean, it could really sort of hit a cliff, and we could lose that last couple of percent of value in a maybe not overnight, like you said, but in a relatively shorter period of time.
Absolutely. At some point, it's going to hit a trigger, and then it will implode at that point. So, but at that point, see, people are waiting for that point to then make their decisions. Okay, I'll buy gold when the dollar's collapsing and, this and that. You have to be already prepared or you will suffer the consequences. You're going to be ready to be slaughtered. If you're not prepared right now, or at least you're, on your way to making preparations, and that's something we can discuss. If you're not already on your way, you're probably going to fail. It's probably going to be a huge disaster for you, and unfortunately for your family as well. So that's what, you and I are here talking about. We're trying to help people get prepared. Realize that, gold is not necessarily a saving grace, but, I'd rather have my money in gold than have my money in a falling dollar.
And the first Friday of every month, we get the unemployment report, and this month's report, the unemployment rate was down to 7%. But I have a feeling that you think the worst is behind us.
That's a absolute guarantee. That's for sure. We have barely scratched the surface on how bad things will get. See, people. Already, if you really talk to any of the financial advisors or any of the marketing people in the industry, you'll find out that they believe that the crash is long behind us. Don't worry about it. The Dow is at, near record highs, and things are moving along swimmingly. Look at the unemployment numbers. Wow, it's 7% now. That's excellent. So, I would have to just remind people that the numbers that we are provided by this government, by any government around the world, by that matter, but any of these governments are providing statistics that are completely fraudulent. If someone wants to really look deep into this, they'll really see. Now, shadowstats.com, John Williams, he provides an excellent view into this deeper. I subscribe to his newsletter there, and every single time it comes out, you just see it is a clear and obvious fact. The numbers that they give us are false. So, I look at the numbers, but I don't really pay attention to them, and it doesn't affect or change the way I've viewed my future and the preparations that I'm making. So these numbers, totally fake. When people think that they're actually getting better, that is absolutely not the case. The government is in so much trouble right now. It has actually gotten to the point where it is, if I had to put money on it, I would say there's no chance of recovery. At least in the next period of time, there has to be a major collapse. That's the only way, really the only way out, in a way.
And you mentioned John Williams at Shadowstats. Do you know what number he has come up with for the actual U.S. unemployment rate?
If I'm not mistaken, 23%, but you can correct me on that.
That sounds pretty accurate, actually. It's been a little while since I was at the site, but less than a month ago that I was there, but that sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah, so we can tell that it is obvious that, these numbers are way off. Why? Because people don't even realize this, but the number, the U6 number, if they aren't working for a year or can't find a job for a year, they're automatically wiped off the unemployment numbers. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Of course, that's going to obscure the numbers, but people don't care. As long as Obama is on stage and he reads off that teleprompter and he tells you that the economy is getting better, it's getting better. And as long as they can keep giving people those food stamps and those Obama phones, they're going to be well-behaved individuals.
And if you just graduated from college with $50,000 in student loans and you've never been in the workforce because you were in school, and let's say you've been looking for a job for 3 or 4 years now, you probably feel unemployed. However, because you never had a job and you never quit working, the U.S. government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they don't consider you unemployed, do they?
That's correct. The numbers are made and designed specifically to make it look better than it is. And this has been, they progressively have done this. Of course, the further back you go, the more accurate the way they calculate it is. And, this is why people, when I see it on CNN or whatever, if I'm looking on the internet here, I think it's really laughable that people actually believe it. It's really a joke.
Because they keep moving the metrics, they keep moving the goalpost of what it takes to be considered unemployed. If you were unemployed for 2 years and then you were unable to find employment after that, and then you decided that, maybe my trick knee over here, I really probably wouldn't be able to keep a job anyway. So since I can't find one, I'm going to go file for disability. And we now have almost 11 million people in America on disability, and they're not unemployed, are they? According to the BLS.
That's right. That's just one more statistic that obscures the number that people are really looking for. So that when they look for the jobs numbers, those themselves are obscured as well. So the whole thing, if people are relying on those numbers, you're really, really in trouble, because it's not these numbers that matter, even though that's keeping up the Dow Jones in some sort of way. Of course, it's the Federal Reserve that's doing that, but it doesn't really matter. All that matters is what the real economy is. Do you have a job, yes or no? Are you able to provide for your family? Do you have something to pass down to your children? Or are you going to leave them with a $200,000 or $500,000 mortgage for them? And, it's something like this that people really need to get through. And I'm glad that, there is a slow awakening occurring in many people.
And as we look across the globe, there's a lot of potential black swans sort of hovering above us. We've got, obviously, the American economy is not doing well. We were just talking about unemployment, and unemployment all through Europe is really, really bad. We hear these stories about vast amounts of cities in China that were just built, and nobody lives in any of them. And there's something like 20 that are about the size of Manhattan, to give us a perspective in America of how big these huge vacant cities are. And when you look at all of the global chaos, we now have Israel and the Saudis actually making sort of an agreement, because they're both ticked off at America for signing off on Iran's nuclear program. So that's the equivalent of cats and dogs living together, isn't it? So
that's right.
When you look around the globe, what has you the most worried right now?
There's so many different possible events that could result in a collapse in different ways. We have World War III always at our doorstep. So many different reasons for people to want to fight World War III. Right now, the thing in Iran is obviously a big issue, but I'm actually glad that, at least on the surface level, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but at least on the surface level, it's calmed down, at least from the U.S. being the real strong force. But what ultimately is a guarantee, it's that the economy will collapse so bad it will make 2008 look like nothing. The only thing I am unsure of is, will it be worse than the Great Depression? And I think in some ways it actually will be. This is not fear-mongering. I'm legitimately concerned, so I'm making the preparations for myself now. People are worried about gold confiscation, so they say don't buy gold. So what do? They will then, put their money somewhere else. I believe that you need to split your money up in every different possible asset you can. This future is so uncertain that you could not rely on any one source or two or three. You need to have your money split across multiple avenues. When I'm talking about what really worries me right now, the worst possible thing is a hyperinflationary scenario. Not enough people are prepared. And because of this, because we're not self-sufficient in any way, back in the Great Depression, people were a little bit more prepared. There was a lot more farmland around. People were more handymen. They could handle themselves better. You also only had one person in the workforce back then. So if you needed to, if the wife needed to get a second job, maybe she could do something on the side. Now both people must work in order to support that household in most cases. There are so many different things that are different from previously to now. And ultimately, we're not ready for it. And that's going to crash this whole system.
And you mentioned it slightly there in the Great Depression that there were a lot more farmers. I think it was 90% of people lived on farms and 10% of the people lived in the cities during the Great Depression. And now because of the big combines and the tractors and the mechanized methods of farming now, the exact opposite demographic's true. We've got 90% of people living in the cities and only 10% living on the farms. So yeah, that's a great point, because less and less people now are able to provide for themselves without those systems of support. And another big thing that was different in the Great Depression is there was a lot of goodwill. I don't think they were playing the knockout game prior to the Great Depression.
That's right. A lot of things have changed since then, and ultimately we didn't have derivatives back then. We didn't have all sorts of these banking schemes that we do now. Now, like, it was bad back then, especially towards the end in the Roaring '20s, where, the bankers started to really realize how much money they could actually profit. But now today, there is no semblance of reality in the financial system. I'm telling you that as somebody who researches this day in and day out. There is no reality left in it. The number that you see on the TV are completely fraudulent. This is a warning to people. While you still can, you have to watch your savings, watch your wealth, and do not watch it as it disappears.
Very good advice. And in the past few months, strong economic numbers have sent the stock market reeling. The market's scared that if they actually get a recovery, the Fed will scale back on their insane levels of new money creation. Last week, the market plunged after hearing the Fed is now, once again, considering tapering again. We've sort of been doing this, I don't know if you ever played the game in school. It was called red light, green light, where a person would turn around and say green light, and you had to run before they turned back around and said red light.
Exactly what it is.
And that's exactly what the Fed's been doing, because it's every other week, we're going to taper, we're not going to taper, we're going to taper, we're not going to taper. And every time they say we're going to taper, the market runs for cover. And then every time Janet Yellen comes out and says she's going to print till the cows come home, and maybe well after they've been turned into hamburger, it shoots back up. So are the fears that the market has of tapering, do you think those are realistic? Or do you think that Janet Yellen's going to just keep printing and possibly even print more than Helicopter Ben did, no matter what?
Absolutely. They're going to have to print more money. $85 billion a month is not enough, not even close to enough. In fact, I'm surprised they haven't increased that number by now. But for the time being, they will have to keep this going. They will have to keep interest rates very low, and there's nothing really they can do, because as soon as they pull that crutch from the system, it's going to fall. There's nothing else supporting it. All the big money has, unless it's specific stocks and certain individuals like Warren Buffett has, his money in areas he knows that will recover on the other side of the collapse. But real people, real investors, average investors, the smart ones have already gotten their money out, because they know that ultimately this is going to be so disastrous to equities in particular, but people don't realize that. So again, what we need to do is realized that the Federal Reserve has a policy, and that policy is to destroy the U.S. dollar, no matter what the result of that is. It is intentionally to destroy the U.S. dollar. If you think about its track record so far, it has been unsuccessful at anything it has ever tried to accomplish. There is no point since its creation where it has actually fixed anything. You just look at the way the interest rates have gone. Every time they put the interest rate up to a respectable level, the economy will crash. Every single time. You look at that chart in history. Look at the Fed funds rate from the St. Louis Fed. You can see that online. And every time they bring it up to a respectable level, the economy crashes. It is inevitable. You cannot bring the interest rates up without a crash. They now brought the interest rates all the way down to zero. They only have one piece of ammunition left, and that is to print money. And they need to escalate that in order to continue support this economy that is nothing but a leech.
And speaking of the interest rate, despite all of the quantitative easing that we've had, we've still seen interest rates almost, on the 10-year at least, almost, which is the benchmark, and that's what they use to set mortgage rates and a lot of other credit card rates and a lot of other things. We've seen it almost double in the past few months, despite all of this quantitative easing and all of this new money creation. Is the Fed losing control?
That's a really interesting one. I don't think they're losing control because ultimately they have full control of the system, or at least not necessarily the Fed, but those who control the economy behind us. So I would have to say that they're probably playing some game that maybe testing the market or somehow, but regardless, they're never not in control. Even when it seems like the market's collapsing, they're always in control of the system. They know exactly what's going to happen. They have computer algorithms already programmed to, determine what is going to happen in the future of the market. So, with that specifically, I wouldn't pay too much attention to that, at least historically from what I've seen. Ultimately, interest rates will need to stay low until they are ready to collapse the system. And they will do so intentionally.
And then you mentioned that we're printing $85 billion a month in new money creation. That totals up to over $1 trillion a year in total quantitative easing. $1 trillion a year, that's 7% of the U.S. GDP. If GDP growth is around 3% and you subtracted that 7% by stopping quantitative easing, wouldn't that leave us with a 4% decline in GDP?
That is true, but I would like to say that, we are so far behind. The GDP number that we're seeing really is so inaccurate that you should not even look at it because it's so ridiculous what they say that the economy is actually growing in some ways. There is no way, shape, or form where the economy is growing. That is absolutely ridiculous to me. And, I study this all the time. I'm looking into this constantly, looking at the statistics, looking at it historically, and I'm not able to find any positive outlook on this economy, on the market, anything. When they say that, inflation's at this number, I can't believe it. I just cannot believe it. It doesn't make any sense.
It seems a lot of liquidity is flowing into the art market. We just saw Andy Warhol's picture of a car wreck sell for $105 million recently. Other pieces are also setting record prices. The diamond market's really hot right now. We're seeing huge increases in that market. Is this a sign of large net worth individuals trying to evade fiat currencies?
That's absolutely correct. In fact, I just did a video about this fairly recently, how I'm showing that the collectibles market, something that Mark Faber has talked about many times, that it is a boom for certain individuals who know what they're doing. So if you know numismatic coins and that's your specialty, then perhaps putting some of your money into that is an excellent way to preserve your wealth. Now, of course, the big-time investors, they've probably already got a full supply of gold, a full supply of silver. They've got jewelry. They've got, diamonds. They need to get out there and sort of diversify so they get something that they can enjoy at the same time that will retain value. And a lot of that is the collectibles. So they're getting into that. It's a boom. That's how you know that individuals on the inside, the billionaires, the multimillionaires, these individuals here know what's going on. They want to get their money out of dollars. They know specifically where the dollar is going.
And then on the subject of records, the U.S. Mint sold a record amount of U.S. Silver Eagles this year. They sold 40 million ounces in silver and U.S. Eagles. And that was in November. That was back last month. So they still have, at the point that they hit that record amount, they still had another 6 weeks or so of sales, which of course they're continuing to sell. But despite and of course record sales would indicate record demand because you have to have demand to make the sales. And despite the record demand, we're seeing the silver prices plummet. Is that typical in economics that we would see demand rise and price plummet like that?
It's absolutely what I'm talking about here. This manipulation should be totally disregarded because I'm seeing the real market, as you talked about. Individuals there are having a hard time actually getting the physical metal. And meanwhile, the prices are at lows that, it's a bargain price right now for gold or silver. People don't realize this, that they see the price and that's all they're worried about. I have so many people telling me, David, I don't know, the silver price, it's been hurting lately. And I'm thinking to myself, and I tell them, that's the excellent time to buy. And I say, don't worry if the price won't even go up. It doesn't matter. You're preserving your wealth and you're getting it at a cheap price. That's the important part. So, just to say, the silver price, the gold price, these are items that we need to really not worry about. We just need to take our 9-to-5 paychecks and we need to put them into something that holds value. The real physical metals market is near all-time highs in terms of how many people want them, and that's what we need to really focus on. It's limited quantity.
And then last week we had Dr. Kirk Elliott on the show, and he was talking about production costs, and he estimates that the production cost for the average all-in cost for producing an ounce of silver, the average is around $25. Of course, you've got some miners that are producing below that level and some that are producing above that level, but I think there's very, very few that are producing it below $20 where we're at right now. So obviously it's not a thing that we've just hit this ability to really produce the metal more efficiently and get more of it out of the ground. Actually, I think that the ore grades are going down, just like oil or anything else. You have to keep putting more and more energy in to keep getting less and less of the metal out of the ground. So I don't think that we're going to see production costs go any lower than they are right now. Do you think that these miners will be able to keep mining at these price levels?
I think that somewhat they will continue because they see the price eventually rising, and they're going to be sitting on a lot of silver ready to go, and they can be the ones to sell it off to different companies. However, I don't see any new miners or many new miners getting into the business. It just isn't worth it at this price. That's what people don't realize. They're going to eventually run out of these mines, and they're not going to open up new ones, and then you're going to have a real shortage. Right now, when you look at the actual, from the World Gold Council, for example, you'll see that they show the numbers. The amount of supply and demand is approximately equal. And this is a very, very dangerous thing to have for the average investor because that means a multiplication in its price. But to get back to this, I forgot to mention it, but the gold and silver prices that we see are really the futures contracts and the paper garbage, gold and silver. The actual physical metal, if you're going to measure it in US dollars, sure, you can label it as that, $1,000 an ounce for gold, let's say. But that's not what its real value is. It has so much more value than this number that they can manipulate up or down. That's what I'm trying to get at. So basically, get in while you can, because, I mean, eventually these prices, once this collapse officially takes hold and it goes to the hockey stick, you're going to have a big problem getting any. So you want to have it now, at least a little bit. And I do advise a lot of people to get junk silver, because a lot of people, they ask me, when I'm building their action plans, I tell them to get junk silver, because even if you got $5, $10, $20, you could still buy some and you can collect it, and there's no fear of confiscation or anything like that. So it's a really good asset to get.
And then you talked about the hockey stick. Do you have any kind of a price target of where you expect the price of gold to be when it takes off?
It's going to be somewhere near infinite, at least for a short period of time. I get a lot of people telling me, they're going to hit, it's going to hit 10,000 or 20,000 or 50,000. I think that's an unrealistic number, because when the dollar collapses, it's going to be near worthless. And at that point, gold will have to be near infinite. And that's what it was during the Weimar Republic. It was near infinite. I mean, in any hyperinflation, the dollar becomes worthless. So measured in that dollar, it would be near infinite. So those holding it are going to be very, very wealthy. And that's sort of the topic of my book, is those holding the real assets will be the ones holding all the wealth. Not because it's necessarily worth anything more than real estate or anything, but it just holds value well.
Yeah, I think Dr. Ron Paul has also said that when the dollar finally dies, that nobody will give you any amount of gold for any amount of dollars. So I think that's what you're saying, infinite.
Exactly.
And what about real estate? Where do you see real estate prices 5 years from now? Will the hedge funds keep the price propped up, or could inflation push prices even higher, or could rising interest rates actually take prices lower?
Well, in Canada, I could tell you right now, real estate prices are absolutely exaggerated and totally fictional. Where I'm living in Toronto here, the average home price is probably around 600,000 or so. And that's not necessarily a spectacular house. That is your average house. So, I mean, the prices are so astronomical, and it's almost as if there's nothing really going on in the worldwide economy that would affect these prices. And the reason is because they brought these mortgage rates down so low that people are buying homes they really cannot afford. If the interest rate doubles from where it is today, that would still be historically pretty low. So many people in Canada, the UK, Australia, the US, wherever, these people will be destroyed. Foreclosures, they would go bankrupt, all kinds of things would have to happen right away, very dramatically. So people don't realize that, but as long as the interest rates stay low, they're not worried. They don't care. They don't want to know about it. As long as they pay their bills, everything's just fine. In the U.S., it could go either way. Of course, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac was a huge disaster, but lo and behold, the U.S. taxpayer is going to have to foot the bill for that one for the rest of eternity. But don't worry, because they're going to be paying back themselves in deflated dollars. So it's not going to be an issue. But I really can't tell where the prices are going to head, lower or higher specifically. All I can tell you is that if you do own real estate, hang on to it and have no fear, because at the very least, you have something that's real.
But if you're in a city, do you think the cities could get unlivable in a collapse scenario? And if so, should we take advantage of the higher real estate prices and maybe try to liquidate that property and get something that's maybe a few miles outside of the city? And then what about something that's maybe in some markets, if people were in the city and the price is exaggerated, maybe they could get out and get something that's 10 or 20 miles away from the center of downtown for a little cheaper than what they sold that property for, and maybe even still have enough left over to get a couple acres out in the woods and maybe with a small 1 or 2 bedroom cabin on it, or maybe even a mobile home to go park on that property to have something in case the worst case scenario materialized.
This is exactly what I recommend to people. If you're in the big city, you're in the high-rise tower, you're going to be in big trouble, because when the chaos hits, people are going to be basically at their last, I want to say basically at the very end of their life, almost in a very realistic way. So they're going to do everything. They're going to kill. They're going to do whatever it takes. They're going to steal, especially. And there's going to be a lot of looting. And of course, the individuals in this metropolis areas are going to be the ones hurt the most. So I suggest to people get on the outside of town, but not too far, and then have that be, let's say, your main home. And then have a place, perhaps you can have it on even in the cottage country, or then if you want to really take this to another level, you can have what you were suggesting there, way out in nowhere. You don't ever want to live there. It'll be just somewhere just in case, the stuff hits the fan and you're really need to get out really right away, your outskirt of town home just really didn't cut it. You can go there and you have somewhere to live. At least you'd have somewhere, even though it might not be a nice place. You have somewhere to go. The mobile home's also a great idea to have in that spot. So this is something I definitely recommend to people. And, it does take money, but you should do that now while we have that money that's still worth something.
And the Congress is working on a deal right now. They're trying to get a budget together. Supposedly they're close, but who knows? On their last budget debacle, shortly after that, China issued a statement saying that the global economy needs to de-Americanize. If the global economy de-Americanizes and de-dollars, what's going to happen to all of those dollars that are spread around the world? Are they all going to come rushing back to America? And if they do, what will that do to prices here in America?
Well, it's going to happen slowly, as I suggested towards the beginning of the interview. So ultimately, see, this is what I find funny. I actually had a talk with a VP of a marketing department, one of the largest mutual fund companies in Canada. I'll leave it at that. And this individual was absolutely determined, and he believed that, this is concrete. We're exporting our inflation. No need to worry. We don't have inflation here. We're exporting it. And no matter what I told him historically and statistically, he was not convinced, because we're exporting our inflation apparently. But these individuals don't realize that after time, eventually it's going to have to come back. It's a boomerang effect, particularly because every so many decades we go on to a new monetary system. We are way overdue at this point, and we are going to have to face a new reality. That's the scary thought. This is a frightening message, unfortunately. We are going to have to face a new reality soon, and that is a dollar that is no longer reigning supreme.
So to sum it all up, I guess basically you're telling us that we need to get out of the dollar while we still can, and get out of the cities while we still can. And can you just recap everything you've told us of what we can do to prepare ourselves from this coming disaster?
Absolutely. I suggest that people right away, immediately, take their money, most of their money. I mean, you need some cash. Take their money out of the banking system. They're going to collapse it via inflation, and also using the bail-in strategy, something, that I've covered many times, but the bail-in strategy, they're actually going to extract money from people's bank accounts, and they're going to destroy anyone who saves, by basically making it impossible for you to save when they're giving you no interest on your money. So that's one way that they're doing this. You need to take your money out of this banking system. Where do you put it? You put that into real assets. Whatever is best for you, but I suggest spreading it across many different assets. So you'll want gold, you want silver, you want junk silver, you want land, you want real estate, collectibles if you're, if you know what you're doing. I suggest people, first of all, get a second job. That is very important. I myself work 3 jobs just to be able to support myself and be able to prepare for this future that I'm preparing for. So you need a second job, and at least, if you're not a handyman, perhaps you have another skill. Perhaps you're a computer guy, you know computers. I suggest working on those computer skills, getting people, getting clients, and trying to get that extra money and instantly transferring it into a real asset. That's one thing. And also get prepared. I don't understand why people don't have a filter such as the Berkey filter. I have it myself. I think it's the greatest thing. And if you were, needed to go off the grid, you could take swamp water and put it in there, and you have clean drinking water. That's ultimately an essential, and you can have that right now. That's something you can have right now. I considered it an asset. And I would also suggest people get storable food. For a few $100s, it could literally save your life. And people are so foolish. You know what? I'll wait it out, see how it goes. You never need to eat it. It could just be there in a storage closet somewhere. That's ultimately a guarantee. You have to get your storable food. You have to get your water in check. Those are 2 things that are before the gold and silver that you need to get ultimately. And, there are various other things. I cover them, at nauseum in my book and in my, on my YouTube. But, basically just get prepared now and, don't delay, because ultimately the more people that are saved now, the less, hardship we're going to be facing later.
And of course, we'll have links in today's show notes to your book and to your website and to your YouTube channel. But can you tell the folks that might be listening on Stitcher or iTunes where they can find you?
Absolutely. So you can go to themoneygps.com, and that's my website, which basically mirrors a lot of the information that's on my YouTube channel. So the YouTube channel is just The Money GPS. You can search that on YouTube. And I update pretty much every single day, and they can get new information. Over 1,000 subscribers on there, so it's growing, and that's a positive light for liberty, because people are really realizing that the media is not really telling me the truth. I'm in search of something more and something better. So you can find me on there, and of course you can find me on Prepper Recon, where we do these fantastic interviews like this.
Very cool, very cool, David. Thanks again for coming back on the show. We always enjoy having you on.
I appreciate it very much. Take care.
Hey Preppers and Patriots, my new book, American Exit Strategy, Book 1 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles, is now available in audiobook format through Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Of course, you can still purchase the Kindle edition or paperback edition through Amazon as well. God-fearing patriots and those who believe in the Constitution will find this near-future dystopian novel to be right up their alley. Those who are looking to be more informed about the potential threat to America's financial stability will learn what to watch for and how to prepare themselves for an economic collapse. In Book 1, America is on the cusp of financial annihilation. Matt and Karen Baer face the challenges of Main Street during a full-scale financial meltdown. Government borrowing and monetary creation have reached their limits. When funds are no longer available for government programs, widespread civil unrest erupts across the country. Matt and Karen are forced to move to a more remote location, and their level of preparedness is revealed as being much less adequate than they believed prior to the crisis. Meanwhile, Paul Randall, a third-party presidential candidate, arises to push back against the welfare and warfare spending that have bankrupted our country. Paul Randall proposes a plan to mitigate the coming hyperinflationary collapse, which is a mathematical certainty. His plan is known as the American Exit Strategy. American Exit Strategy uses survival fiction to take an in-depth look at the real-life politics and economics behind the issues that are likely to trigger a currency collapse or financial meltdown in the near future. American Exit Strategy is a work of fiction until it becomes history. The book is chock full of great prepper tips, and it makes a great Christmas gift for those who are trying to wake up to the need to prepare. Get your copy today at AmericanExitStrategy.com or through Amazon. God bless and happy prepping.